Welcome to Relevant Revitalization, where you will find out the good, bad, and ugly of church revitalization. You will hear from pastors who have been through the revitalization experience, experts in the field, and much more, all with the goal of equipping, encouraging, and engaging you, your leadership, and your congregation to see God-breathed life in your church. Now, let's get into some relevant revitalization.
Welcome back to another episode of Relevant Revitalization. I'm your host, Matt Coyne, and today I have the honor of chatting with Terry Thompson. He is the Leadership Development Pastor at Rock Point Church and founder of Small Church USA. Terry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Matt. Good to be with you. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad to have you. It's been quite the journey to get you on here, but we got you on.
Finally made it.
Yes, I'm excited to have you on and talk to you about revitalization. But before we get to that, I just briefly introduced you. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your ministry, family, passions, hobbies, all that fun stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been in full-time ministry for over 40 years. Have a terrific wife, Kelly, 2 kids, two daughters, 2 son-in-laws, 6 very energetic grandkids. And so our family all lives really close to each other. So that's a real joy to be able to grow up with them and continue to invest in their lives. My ministry pathway has been, I was a youth pastor for 12 years in Indianapolis, Indiana. I was an associate pastor for 2 years in Columbus, Ohio. So 2 very metropolitan areas. Mm-hmm. And then God called us to Crawfordsville, Indiana, out in the middle of West Central Indiana, a small town of 15,000 people, for my first lead pastor position. And so we've been here now for 25 years and just watch God do some really cool stuff. And I think we'll get into that a little bit later. But that's kind of ministry where God has taken me. And just personally, man, I love the outdoors. I love to hunt. I love anything outdoors, right? And traveling, camping. I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, so I've jumped out of airplanes. I've been to the Amazon jungle. I've explored Israel. All kinds of crazy stuff. You can probably see on my bookshelf behind me. There's a little display for Indiana Jones because he's kind of like my guy. So a lot of fun stuff like that. A lot of adventure.
That's awesome. I like hearing adventure. So part of your adventure, part of your journey has been Small Church USA. And you and I did not get to talk, but I crossed paths with your ministry at the TGC conference this past year. And I forget who I talked to. We talked for about 15 minutes. It was a great conversation. And I said, and it stuck out, Small Church USA, because of my demon work and because of my passions. I went, I got to talk to these people. So can you tell us a little bit about, maybe not even a little bit, as much as you want, about Small Church USA? Because I think your ministry would be a huge impact for many of those who listen to our show.
You bet. Yeah. So when we came to Crawfordsville, Indiana, small town America, my first lead pastor position, I took a church that had been in steady decline for 10 years. And there were 20 elderly people left. There were 2 men, no kids, and the rest were elderly ladies. And the average age was 64 years old. The church was just worn out. The facility was worn out. The people were worn out. They were actually just getting ready to close their doors. And they decided to give it one last shot, right? And so they contacted another church and said, would you be willing to come alongside and kind of help partner with us to get our church back on its feet again? And that's where Kelly and I came into the picture. We got contacted. I was 35 years old. Like I said, I love a challenge. I love an adventure. And it's like, okay, I've never done something like this before. Let's give it a shot. And so we rolled into town. Really, this was in 1998. So before church revitalization was even a cool word. And the goal was, hey, let's just see if we can get the church healthy, because it was just so unhealthy in so many ways. Yeah. And so as we started to work on just getting the church healthy, God began to do just a mighty work, and the revitalization process started. And there's a lot in between, but if you fast forward 25 years down the road, that church of 20 elderly people is now a ministry of over 1,000 people on Sunday morning. And God did immeasurably more than we could ever ask or imagine in this little town. And so that was a really cool journey that God took us on. And in my mind, as God did that, I always thought, man, I want to be able to help others, right? With what we've learned, all the things that have gone well, and all the mistakes that we've made, which have been many as well. But how can we help other people? So a couple of years ago, we started a succession plan for me. I'm 61 years old, and we brought in a next generation pastor. We did a year-long transition handoff to them. At the end of that handoff, they asked me to stay on the staff and work with our young staff in leadership development and stuff like that. But part of the plan for me for the next season of ministry was to do something to help pastors and churches that needed help. And in the 24 years that God did amazing things here, a lot of pastors and churches reached out to us saying, how did you do the revitalization? Can you help us? And we did what we could with the bandwidth that we had, which wasn't very much when you're leading a church that size. And so we decided to start Small Church USA so that we could, on a very intentional basis and a much broader scale, help all these pastors and churches that have been reaching out to us saying, can you help? Because we knew the need was huge. And so we started Small Church USA. We've been doing it now for a couple of years. We have a year-long engagement that we do with pastors and churches. And already we're at 100 churches that we've worked with in the last couple of years. And God just keeps throwing open more doors all the time. I was just in Jamaica, did a Small Church USA conference there. We've got our first 2 Jamaican pastors that are going to be joining us in April to start their year-long engagement with us. And so it's just been a really cool, exciting journey that God's had us on. And we're just super thankful for what he's doing and how he's using it.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I mean, I love the idea of the churches the pastors coming together. I know I was sad I couldn't join the January group, but I'm hoping to here coming up, because I think it's doing it together is such a vital thing. And I was just talking to a friend of mine this morning about how pastors, it can be a lonely kind of, solo position if you're not intentionally stepping out and looking for those relationships. So I appreciate you doing that. And where can people find out more about Small Church USA?
Yeah, smallchurchusa.com.
Okay.
So it's real easy.
Yes. Yeah. And
that's our website. And and they can get on there. And if they want to call me directly, all my contact information's on the website.
Awesome. And it's a well done website, by the way. I just got done doing a portion. I didn't even tell you this. I got done doing a portion on building a website, and I used yours as an example as a well done website. Don't worry, I cited you. I didn't plagiarize. I cited you appropriately, but well done website, very clear, professionally done. And I know some people don't care about that. I'm telling you from a person who's seen it, it helped. It's an easy to navigate website. So yeah, definitely check that out, smallchurchusa.com. And I think if you're listening, it's going to be a blessing to get involved, at least have a conversation with Terry. I think would be a great start. So speaking of all this, with you being the leadership development pastor at Rock Point Church and what you do, something we haven't really talked about here on the show, Terry, is healthy leadership. Now, we've given away the Emotionally Healthy Leader by Pete Scazzaro, and we've talked about it. But it's interesting to me because I think if we say the term healthy leader in the church, you could ask 10 different people and they could give you 10 different answers. But for you, what does it mean to be a healthy leader? And I mean, I know we talk a lot within the revitalization journey, but I guess a healthy leader in the church in general? What do you, how would you define that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get asked that all the time because the tagline for Small Church USA is it's not about church size, it's about church health. And so getting healthy, whether that's the individual or the organization, is really the key, because God can use healthy things much more than he can an unhealthy. And when I often speak at conferences, someone will ask me, what's your definition of a healthy church? Which is the same question you just asked, basically, what's your definition of a healthy pastor? And I'm actually writing a book right now on church revitalization to clarify what does it mean to be healthy. And one of the really cool things that is a medical term that it's called homeostasis. And a medical doctor friend of mine actually told me about this as I was working with Small Church USA. And it basically means that all of the internal organs of the body not only have to be healthy, but they also have to work in harmony with one another for the church to actually be healthy. And I think whether you look at an organization or you look at an individual, there are certain things that if one thing, goes off the rails on you, it can multiply where everything else gets affected. And that's really the whole idea behind the medical term homeostasis. If everything's not like in sync and in balance and functioning in unity, everything can get thrown out of balance really quickly. So a healthy leader, we actually have one of the sessions that we do with Small Church USA is what does it look like to be a healthy pastor? And we look at 6 different areas that we help guys evaluate and then say, man, like this is probably an area that I need some work on in order to keep my balance healthy and the homeostasis where it ought to be. So here's the 6 things that we help guys with. And I think as we've been doing this now for, with 100 different pastors, like seasons in life change and the balance can get thrown off in different areas, right? So it's a continual work in progress trying to stay healthy. And but we look at, is he healthy spiritually? The two things that we would diagnose there would be spiritual disciplines and fruit of the Spirit. So the spiritual disciplines are kind of the internal, are these things active in my life? But the fruit of the Spirit's also really important because that's what comes out, right? Because what's on the inside comes out. And so if what's coming out isn't good, if the fruit of the Spirit isn't evident, then there's a health issue there somewhere on the inside. So is he healthy spiritually? Is he energized in his marriage? You get a pastor that marriage is not good, that's going to make an unhealthy pastor very quickly. Is he accountable relationally? So accountability is a big thing, obviously, for health. Is he active physically? So we talk about eat, sleep, and exercise. Kind of the 3 big things that if we're going to steward our body well to be a healthy pastor, those are things that we have to steward. Is he right financially? And then is he teachable in humility? And so we explore all those different areas in our session, and then pastors have to go back and like do some gauging, and we give them some measurables to work through. And then we try to pinpoint, okay, like what's the area you need to work on in order to make sure you're staying healthy as the leader of the church. So that's kind of how we approach that.
Yeah, that's and I love that you brought in not just spiritually, you brought in physically, you brought in mentally, you brought in, of course, family. And so I think that as pastors, we focus on, am I healthy spiritually? Some don't. Like you said, there's seasons when we don't, but we neglect those other areas. And I was smiling as you talked about homeostasis. No, how do you say it? Homeostasis. And I know that. I'm sorry. Anyways, I like that you say, because I always use the term of an orchestra and how you have all these different instruments, but together they play the same sheet music in harmony, and it makes this beautiful sound in unity. So I love that picture of the human body working together to create a healthy human and leader. So,
and we did that because of 1 Corinthians 12, where Paul says the church is a body, and then he uses the human body as an illustration. And so we've correlated that with Small Church USA as we talk about the different vital organs of a church body. What does it look like for those to be healthy?
Okay. Well, I think that is such a. Now, when you say you work, this is part of the training that you do is going through those 6 areas with a pastor, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's one of the sessions that we do as a healthy pastor.
Okay. So my question that, okay, so you define what a healthy leader is in a great way, and how we can really diagnose, are we healthy or not? But then my next question is, how do we remain healthy throughout the revitalization journey? Because I know I can say firsthand, and I'm sure you can too, that there are seasons within the journey that, it's tough. So how do you remain healthy through that?
Yeah, I think revitalization is a marathon and not a sprint. And I think that's a really important distinction to make, that generally a revitalization is going to take 3 to 5 years to probably get a church back to a healthy place and moving forward. And so guys have to be committed to that, that I'm in this thing for the long haul. It's a marathon and it's not a sprint. And so some of it, I think, is a mentality. I think the other piece of that is that pastors have to understand that being healthy is key, because you're going to institute change in order to get your church healthy. And whenever you go to mess with the status quo, you're going to get challenged because of that. And if you're not in a good place and you're going to take some adversity and some hits, like that's going to be a really hard thing to do. And so I love the quote that's in Todd Bolsinger's book, Canoeing the Mountains. He says, leaders need to disappoint their people at a rate they can absorb. And that's a really good quote, and it's a really challenging quote, but that's what leaders do. They institute change, but they disappoint people at a rate they can absorb. So you got to know how hard to push and when to let off the gas, and all of that stuff if you're going to move things forward. And so just continual evaluation of how am I doing, and if I get to a place where I'm not healthy, I have to be willing to reach out and ask for help, because isolation is just dangerous, right? It's the most dangerous thing we can do is get isolated. So there needs to be a systematic approach for how to do this, and then how to do it with other people. That's how you stay healthy in the process.
Yeah. Such a good reminder. Now, I know there are people listening, there's pastors listening who, unfortunately, they've already gone into they're unhealthy in different areas in their life, and again, I get that. We've all had those times in our life. But Terry, what are some signs that a leader is starting to go down an unhealthy path?
I think the Apostle Paul said, watch your life and your doctrine closely. And I don't think most guys are going to go off the rails doctrinally. In a lot of circles, they won't. But I think the personal side of things is where the struggle happens first. And it can be fatigue, it can be discouragement, it can be depression, it can be all kinds of things that nobody knows us better than us, and probably nobody knows us better than our wives. And so, I think the first place to look is internally, and then maybe an honest conversation with our wife and go, how do you think I'm doing? Right? I feel like I'm struggling. What do you think? That kind of a thing. Yeah. And I know 20 years into our ministry here, I had that conversation with my wife. I got to a place where, and I'd never been there before, and I didn't know really how I got there, but I just didn't feel like I was in a good place. And it was kind of a weird dynamic for me. And I remember sitting on our couch one night, and I looked at Kelly and I said, I don't think I'm in a good place right now, and I'm not sure why, And she said, well, let's call a couple of the elders and let's get them over here and let's talk through this thing. And so we
Yeah.
just addressed it and started talking through some stuff and came up with some things to hopefully get me moving in a positive direction, which we did. And so there's no shame in that, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because we all go through times where we hit those dry seasons, those struggles. We made it not know how we got there, but we're there, right? And
Yeah.
then what we got to do is try to get out of there and be proactive about that.
Yeah. I really appreciate you saying to be vulnerable, to be open, because I was just talking, I do another podcast. We were recording this morning and talking about my wife just joined this Facebook group a few months ago called Life in the Fishbowl. And it's a whole group of pastors' wives. And she was saying how discouraging it is that these wives feel like they can't even go to their husbands with, it's not all like some of it's very encouraging. But some of the comments, she goes, they can't even go to their own husband. And she said, it's just so sad to see this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think as pastors, we need to be willing to be vulnerable and in those moments. And instead of, I mean, what do we want to do? I'm sure you're like me, Terry. I'm going to plow through it. And when I'm being selfish, I'll get through it. I'll do it myself. No, that's not how God designed the church to function. So as you said, we're all part of the body and we all have our own unique gifts, giftedness and skills. So so thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
So I have a little case study for you, a little example. I would love to hear your input on this. So a pastor comes to you personally. They say they're emotionally unhealthy. Their church is on the verge of death. They feel the answer is to give up, to quit because they feel hopeless. What advice do you give? And does that advice change if they say they're physically or spiritually unhealthy?
Yeah. Okay. So I love the illustration of when you get on an airplane, right? And you sit down, you buckle up, and they do the safety briefing. And the first thing they say is, if the compartment loses pressure, oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling. Then the first thing they tell you to do is put your mask on first before you help somebody else. And I think it's a great analogy, because if you go down, you can't help anybody else, right?
Yeah.
And so I think for a pastor that knows, hey, I'm in an unhealthy place, I don't know what to do. The first thing to do is, like, you've got to put the oxygen mask on yourself, and you've got to take care of you, because if the pastor's unhealthy, he can't help somebody else. Yeah. It just doesn't work that way. And, a Small Church USA, we correlate the body and the different parts of the church body. And so Christ is the head. Then we say pastor's the heart. And if the body has a heart attack, like, the whole body goes down, right? And if the pastor go down, the whole body goes down. And so it's like I said earlier, like, if you get into a place where you need help, the first thing you have to do is realize it's okay to say, I need help. And it might be going to your doctor to get a physical. It might be seeking out some kind of biblical counseling, which we got some incredible resources of places that we send guys when they get to that stage where, hey, I need something more than accountability. I need some really solid biblical counseling help. Man, there's just no shame in doing that. There really isn't. And that's, the guy's got to do an initial evaluation to figure out, how do I get healthy so I can lead a healthy organization?
Yeah. I didn't send this question over to you beforehand, so I'm sorry. You might want to, maybe you need to think this through, but have you ever recommended, because it's so interesting, God's timing, that we're talking about healthy leadership, how it's coming up, it seems like, in different areas. Do you ever recommend to pastors to take a step away, to do what you're saying, to go to their church and say, I need to take a step away? Have you ever had to do that? And if so, when do you feel that's appropriate for a pastor to say, I need to take care of myself first?
Yeah, so there are definitely times that needs to be done, where a pastor just needs a sabbatical, But I think a very intentional sabbatical, right?
Yeah.
So that, we're going to give you this X amount of time off, but during this time, we would like to see this accomplished. There is definitely a time when that needs to happen. You got to triage things at different levels. And if somebody's bleeding out, that's a different triage than somebody that has a headache, right?
Yeah.
And so the severity of the crisis is going to heighten the urgency for how you handle the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
But the urgency has to match the crisis.
Yeah. Thank you. I just, as you were talking, that hit my thought process. So thanks for answering that. You've talked so much about how to remain healthy through the revitalization journey, but can you just give us some practical and applicable things for a pastor to do? I mean, kind of just bring all of it in to say, here's some practical things you can do as a pastor to remain healthy through the revitalization journey.
Yeah, I think so. Here's what we see as we talk to pastors that engage with Small Church USA. Generally, they'll say something like, my church is stuck, it's status quo, it's in decline. And here's what they always say in some realm, and I don't know what to do next.
Mm.
So anytime you get into what it looks like a hopeless situation, is always going to be discouraging. One of my favorite leadership phrases is this: when clarity is low, anxiety is high. And when anxiety is high, performance is low. So anytime there's things aren't clear, it brings up the anxiety, and anxiety always affects performance. So if a pastor is in a situation where they need help, the first thing to do is there's got to be a clear pathway forward for what the next step is. And as we start working with pastors that are like, hey, I don't know what to do next, and we start going, okay, here's a plan for how to actually get your church healthy, a very systematic process for how to do that. As soon as the plan becomes clear, the anxiety goes down, the hope goes up, and then they get re-energized that, oh, something can actually be done other than me just sitting here spinning my wheels, not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
And so understanding that, man, the thing that gives hope is clarity. And so whatever that looks like for an individual church, there needs to be a clear pathway forward for the pastor to have hope, which then builds his health. And as soon as the pastor gets clarity and says, hey, we got a plan to go forward, generally, when the church hears that, they get very excited about that, because now the leader has hope and clarity, and that gives the people following him hope and clarity as well.
Yeah, that's good. And I well explained. I think that, I know from my own personal experience coming into Rollins Church, I had this clear vision. I had this, this clear idea. I felt God was leading this church in a direction. And those moments when it got fuzzy, and I'm like, oh no, I was wrong. I shouldn't be here. And I said that to my wife multiple times. I was wrong. I shouldn't be here. And lovingly, she said, it's been 3 months, Matt, settle down. And I was like, no. So I love that you say, because we lead by example in so many areas, including that hope and including that vision. And so when the congregation sees a pastor hopeless, they're going to start to catch on, and that's really contagious. So, and then, like you said, hope is also contagious,
Right.
So
Right.
on the same side, or different side.
Yeah.
Well, Terry, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about just your wisdom, your insight is so, I hope you know personally how much I appreciate it. I know our listeners will as well. There's a few that I know are going to really make me go back and listen to this a couple times, because you said a lot that I know they're dealing with. So without you even knowing, I know you've already impacted a few in particular. So, but before you do head out, as I say every episode, my friend Ryan over at Promotions Guy, he makes it possible for me to give away some resources every episode. So you have you have a resource that you'd like to give away. it's actually going to hit an audience different than we usually do. So can you share that with us?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the sessions we do with Small Church USA in our year-long engagement is also for pastors' wives. What does it look like for the pastor's wife to be healthy? And that is a topic that has just been ignored, I think, way too long. And you mentioned that earlier with your wife being on that podcast. And our wives carry a big burden along with us as we're trying to lead a church. And so actually over the COVID shutdown, my wife Kelly and I wrote a book for pastors' wives, and it's called The Pastor's Wife Survival Playbook. And I would love to send you some of those for you to give away. That'd be fantastic. If we can encourage the pastor's wife, that will then encourage the pastor. That's a win on both ways. So we would love to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah, and as I always say, I don't want to be gimmicky. I'm going to post a picture of the book on Facebook, Instagram. If you are interested, all you got to do is like it, because then I know who's actually interested. And then there's sometimes I give away 1 or 2 copies. Sometimes I give away 3 or 4. So just depending on the interest as well, I thank you so much for offering that resource, because I know, as you said, it's an area that's neglected so often. And so I know my wife will appreciate it as well. So, but yeah, Ryan over at Promotions Guy, I can't say enough good things about him. Yes, he owns his business where he can print anything for you, from golf balls to t-shirts for your church and ministry. But more importantly, Ryan loves the Lord. He loves his church, and he wants nothing more than to see churches revitalized. And so it's an honor to have him alongside with me in this. So again, smallchurchusa.com, right, Terry?
Yes.
Make sure you check him out. But Terry, before you head out, any closing encouragement you have for pastors?
Yeah, I would just say, whatever the journey looks like for you, don't do it alone. It's why we put guys in cohorts of 5 or 6 guys together, because we're working with solo or bivocational pastors. And doing the journey alone is a really tough road to hoe. If you got some guys, a tribe that you can band with to work through this thing together, it's so much better. So I would say, don't do it alone. It can be done. And we have a big God that can still do really big things. And so don't be afraid to launch out there and go for it.
Well, thank you. Great place to end it. So, Terry, thanks again, taking time out of your busy schedule. I know how busy you are. I know what you're doing. So thank you for sitting down and talking about church revitalization. My name is Matt Coyne, and you have been, actually, I forgot to say that this podcast is more than just a podcast. Please reach out to me. I want to be able to encourage you, equip you, and just walk alongside you to pray, to talk, whatever that looks like. Please reach out to me because, again, we want to be here for you. So until next time, I am Matt Coyne, and this is Relevant Revitalization.